The free Cyberpunk 2.0 update is an absolute game changer, literally, as many core aspects like the skill tree, the cop system and cyberware have been reworked. We'll go over everything in this big update, as it's really useful to know what changed before jumping into the Phantom Liberty DLC. One thing you will namely immediately notice is that you will encounter way less loot in the game. Clothing has been made much less important, as it no longer decides your armor rating and therefore you'll find less of it. In a similar fashion, you'll no longer find health packs and grenades, as these now work on a cooldown. That cooldown and the amount of charges per item can be improved by unlocking skills from the technical ability tree, which like every other skill tree has been completely reworked, but more on that in a bit. But while you'll find less loot, the loot you do find is much more exciting, like useful crafting materials or brand new weapons. And weapons are now categorized in tiers, which are kind of similar to the rarities from the previous system, but their core stats are displayed much more conveniently than before the update, which makes comparing similar weapons much easier, so you can easily pick the best one. And unique items still exist as well, with many of them having reworked perks for the update. The Satori katana you can loot early used to have a massive crit buff, but now it has a unique unsheathed attack and synergy with a unique knife called the Nehan that you will also find early. So if you start a new playthrough for this patch like I did, then you will also be rediscovering the old unique weapons, and it's really fun to see how they changed. And yes, I did say crafting components are now also exciting to loot, because among other things they can now be used to upgrade your cyberware. This is definitely one of the biggest changes you want to wrap your head around before jumping into Phantom Liberty, as enhancing your body with mods is now much more important. As I mentioned earlier, clothing is no longer the deciding factor for your armor stat, but cyberware is. Specifically your skeleton, integumentary system and leg cyberware add to your overall armor, and since clothes don't have any stats anymore, you can wear whatever you want without having to worry about your defense. But this new power comes with a big caveat, because V now has a max cyberware capacity. Every piece you slot brings you closer to your maximum limit, meaning you have to prioritize which pieces of cyberware are most important. You can raise your cyberware limit by leveling up, finding capacity upgrades that can drop from enemies, or by investing in skills found in the technical ability tree, which is definitely the big winner of this patch. The high level edgerunner skill from this tree even allows you to go over your regular limit by sacrificing some max health if you really want to go all out. And the icon for that skill will probably look very familiar to anyone who's watched the edgerunners anime, which is a really cool touch. But yeah, if you want to get the most out of your cyberware, you'll want to invest your attribute points in technical ability. And while the system might have changed, familiar pieces of cyberware like the mantis blades have returned. But there are also tons of new cyberware to accommodate for the general changes that have been made to combat, such as clutch padding to decrease the amount of stamina lost when shooting a weapon. Because yes, there is a stamina mechanic tied to shooting next to more huge changes that I want to go over. If you like the video so far, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, as well as we'll be covering the Phantom Liberty DLC on the channel as well. Now, equipping yourself with new cyberware will of course cost you a ton of money, which you could also spend on a nice new ride. Driving has seen some big changes as well, starting with the way you buy cars. Instead of getting text from fixers about single available vehicles, you now have a website you can access that lists all available vehicles sorted by their manufacturer. You can access this website from your home computer or from any terminal marked by this icon on the map. Some will appear locked, meaning you need to get your street cred up before you are able to purchase them, but it's a big improvement to have all of them conveniently available in one place. But the biggest change is the fact that you can now use weapons from the driver's seat, and this actually works really well. While you can manually aim by holding the left shoulder button, the game uses an auto lock on by default, making driving and aiming at the same time a breeze. This will simply make your weapon lock on to the target closest to where you are aiming. When using a controller, you're using the right shoulder button to fire and the triggers to accelerate and brake, so it's super easy to get the hang of. And when on a motorcycle, you can even use a melee weapon, which might not be the most practical playstyle, but it is definitely the coolest. If you don't want to invest your own money in a vehicle, you can of course hijack someone else's car, although you'll definitely want to be more careful with your criminal activity after this new update. The police system has also seen a huge overhaul, and in simple terms, it is now much closer to how a game like GTA handles it. Commit a crime and nearby cops will open fire, but you can choose to flee and have them lose your trail. When driving, you will see nearby police cars and their vision radius, and if you avoid them for long enough, you you will lose your wanted status. However, if you keep finding them, your wanted level will rise and more reinforcements will be sent your way. At the max level of 5, the elite max stack soldiers can show up, but getting there is already quite the effort, as by the time I got to wanted 4, I was being absolutely swarmed by the NCPD. And they don't appear out of thin air anymore either, but actually come driving in police vehicles, again making the system feel very similar to what we're used to from GTA. But even if you're strong enough to hold your own against the NCPD, you might still not be prepared for Phantom Liberty, as Dogtown has its own security force that will come after you if you commit crimes there. But even in main game Night City, the general improvements made to the AI make combat in the city feel much more alive as well. During that wanted spree where I was being swarmed by the cops, nearby gang members took notice and started opening fire on the NCPD. Alternatively, I also came across 2 cops caught in a crossfire between 2 gangs, and even when fighting against a single group or faction, they make smarter use of cover, and close range enemies will either try to rush you or flank you to keep you on your toes. And the combat mechanics have seen a big overhaul as well, as a lot of your performance now depends on your stamina management. Stamina is now used for many important combat actions like dodges and melee attacks, and as I mentioned earlier, shooting a gun will also consume stamina. The lower it gets, the less effective you are at controlling your recoil. So combat becomes much more tactical, as you need to manage your stamina to both dodge attacks and to make sure that your shots land on target. And don't worry, stamina does recharge pretty quickly, so it's not like there is a lot of downtime in combat. You just have to be smart about chaining multiple actions together and duck into cover every now and then to catch your breath. The same is not true for sprinting, by the way, which now no longer consumes stamina, which means that you can endlessly run around Night City, making that a much more pleasant experience. But you'll definitely want to get some practice in with this new combat system before jumping into the Phantom Liberty DLC, not only to get used to the new stamina focus, but also to try out your new skills. Because the reworked skill tree adds a ton of new and exciting abilities for you to try. Whereas the previous version gave you mostly percentage-based increases to a certain weapon type, now you're actually unlocking new actions. You can learn to leap from a vehicle, parry bullets with a sword, or dash instead of dodge to cover more ground. Some of these new actions can also be modified by unlocking some of the smaller nodes next to it. So if you like the mobility of dash and use a lot of melee weapons, you can unlock the Mad Dash skill to double your dash range if you charge towards a target. One thing that is still similar to the old system is that you need to invest enough attribute points in order to unlock higher level skills. So every level up you gain an attribute point that you can invest in body, reflexes, technical ability, intelligence, and cool. Each of those attributes houses multiple skill trees, like reflexes has skills for dashing, blades, and automatic rifles, and you also get a perk point each level up to unlock a skill from these. However, skills are also divided into tiers, which is why you need to invest in an attribute to unlock the corresponding skills. The first tier of skills unlocks at 4 points, the second at 9, the third at 15, and the final tier is unlocked when you have 20 points in a single attribute. Overall, I'm really happy with these changes. It makes leveling up more exciting, as instead of dealing 10% more damage with the weapon, you can now unlock exciting new abilities that actually change up the gameplay. And it's not like those stat increases are gone, as there are also skill challenges that reward you with passive bonuses. There are 5 categories: Headhunter, Netrunner, Shinobi, Solo, and Engineer, and you level them by performing certain actions in the game. So for instance, because I try to remain agile in combat by dodging a lot, I've made some decent progress on the Shinobi skill challenge. So now I have a slight increase to movement speed, and my dashes cost less stamina as well. Each skill challenge gives buffs that fit the playstyle you need to play in order to level it, so effectively, if you play according to your build, you're going to become even stronger. So that should prepare you for all the big changes you'll be seeing in the main game and the DLC as well. We will be covering Phantom Liberty here on the channel, so subscribe to not miss those videos, leave a like on this one if you enjoyed it, and if the next video is already up, you can watch it by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.